And yes, so we are going to have a Flyte community roundtable today. Consider this laid-back space to discuss about Flyte, be it use cases or pain points. We encourage open-ended discussions, so please feel free to ask your questions and join the conversation. So today we have Chris Grass, Guy Arad, Jake Dodd, Dan Butler, Denis Shestov, and Blake Jackson joining us. A big thank you to you all for agreeing to join the discussion. I'm pretty excited for this. So without any further ado, let's get started. So Chris, could you let us know about yourself, the company you work at, and what you do?
Yeah, hi. My name is Chris Grass. I work at MCG Health. We're based out of Seattle. I work on a data platform team. We're trying to spin up kind of a data warehouse solution for the entire company. Part of that is serving data scientists and allowing them to run experiments on our data. And part of it is an ETL platform solution that we're trying to develop. And we're hoping Flyte can help us with both those projects.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And next, Guy, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, sure. My name is Guy. I work for a small startup called Nimble. The startup deals with data collection from the web. I was looking into using Flyte for the workflow orchestration capabilities. We will have as part of our product different workflows we're gonna want to run depending on the kind of data collection we're doing. As far as I could understand, it's not like the original intent of Flyte. We might do machine learning, but that's not the main purpose I want to use Flyte for. We haven't started actually developing and then using it yet, but so far it looks good.
So you are currently using Flyte for data pipelines, right?
No. So we're not using Flyte yet. I'm looking into using it mostly for workflow orchestration.
Okay.
And not specifically for data pipelines, no.
Thank you. And Dan, could you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Dan Butler. I'm a Bioinformatics Analyst at the Salk Institute in San Diego. And I'm also the data management lead for a project called the Salk Harnessing Plants Initiative. So this is a project that involves phenotyping and genotyping plants and doing correlational analysis, you could call it. So right now I'm in the process of testing Flyte for our needs. We have a bunch of analysts spread among a few different research groups here who have developed various pipelines that are mostly run manually right now. And so this is an effort to kind of centralize our workflow orchestration. And so I've implemented a sort of initial version of this system with Flyte and have some learnings, and thought it would be cool to hear what everyone else is doing.
Awesome. Jake.
Hello, so I'm Jake. I'm a machine learning engineer for a London-based startup called Password. We kind of focus on predictive foot traffic for retail companies. So I'm in a small data team, and we're kind of focused on productionizing a lot of the data science notebooks. And we kind of reached the capabilities of what Airflow can offer us. And we're kind of hoping for something that can provide more of a Kubernetes native solution. So we're currently undergoing a POC with Flyte.
All right, thank you. And Chris, I think you already introduced, right? Blake.
Yeah, I'm Blake Jackson. I work for a small software company called RVA Energy. We're a virtual energy shop. The shop was using Spring Batch, but I come from back. I was at Spotify previously. We've been using Flyte there, and so yeah, we're kind of looking to switch out some of the things we're doing with Spring Batch, or some of the new work we're doing to start using Flyte. We are in Kubernetes, so it sort of aligns nicely with what we've got already, and then the experience is there from my past.
Right. Could you talk about the use cases within your company that led you to use Flyte?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like data pipelines for right now, and some I guess workflow orchestration. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty early right now in the ingesting data phase. So.
Thank you. And Denis.
Yes, hi, my name is Denis. I'm working in QuantPi, and we're working in transport CII area and building a solution that helps other company to verify if their model comply with some governance laws. And to this, we also test a model and using different data modification, data transformation. And here we would like to use Flyte for orchestration of all this pipeline, so to compute test results for one and another tests.
Thank you. Also, Ethan, could you introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Ethan Brown. I'm from Domino Data Labs, and we are currently in the process of evaluating pipeline and orchestration tools for integration into our platform. So Flyte's one of the tool chains that's come across kind of my radar, and we're kind of kicking the tires right now and doing a little bit of a POC.
Right. So what are the use cases within your company?
So we provide software. So we're a software vendor. So we have customers that are installed on AWS, on Azure, on GCP, and on on-prem Kubernetes clusters. And so, we have an execution engine within our product, but we're looking for something that provides a little bit more of the orchestration capabilities that a tool like Flyte does.
All right, thank you. And Dan, could you talk about the use cases within your company that led you to use Flyte?
Yeah, sure. So the main two types of data pipelines we have right now are for analyzing genomic data and for analyzing image data and running deep learning pipelines on images. And then finally, we have some downstream pipelines that combine those two sources of data. And right now, each of these different components is basically run by different analysts in our team. And increasingly, it's kind of become a lot of work to just sort of coordinate data flowing from one team to another. And so the idea behind using Flyte for this was to allow these kind of heterogeneous workflows to be used together on an ongoing basis.
So how big is the data?
We have like millions of images and right now sort of hundreds to thousands of genomes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And Jake.
So we do a lot of time series ML models, and our current approach is kind of running them via Docker containers running on VMs. But we've had some issues where some of the more complex models, there's a failure and they're left running when you run them correctly. There's no real way of turning them off as soon as there's a failure. So kind of a main motivation to go towards Kubernetes is the pod fail to detachment and then paying for those resources.
All right, thank you. And Guy. So what's your use case?
You are muted. Sorry.
Damn it. Thank you. Basically, we are our input to the product is a request to do some data collection with certain parameters, and our technology, which is certain steps we need to take in order to collect this data, is going to be a combination of different steps depending on the parameters of the data collection. So basically, we need a good workflow, a flexible workflow orchestration framework that allows like a good, a decent scale, flexibility in terms of using our own images, and the flexibility to connect, to easily connect different steps along the way.
Okay, got it. So how has the experience been so far?
So far, I'm pretty much digging through the documentation. I have been able to deploy an AWS cluster using I think David's Flyte the hard way tutorial. It was difficult. It was indeed the hard way. I eventually managed to have a Flyte cluster running. I managed to submit a workflow, but then it failed immediately because some permission to the S3 bucket, which at that point I put it aside because my main role is not DevOps, and I was hoping that at some point the DevOps will join in and help with permissions. So that was hard. Got almost to the finish line, but didn't. So now I'm actually playing around with the sandbox just to get the feel of the capabilities, and the tutorials are pretty good. I have some questions that are the questions that pops up. That some are answered in other places, some are not. But so far, it seems like it does suits our needs. It seems like pretty robust. I'm still trying to get a feel of the whole monitoring story. For example, I was trying to, after running some workflows, get to the executions themselves and the tasks from the workflow using a Flyte remote object, and I couldn't. Maybe I missed something, and I was going to bring it up in the community, but
yeah, please feel free to post your questions and ask the community channel, and we'll make sure that they are answered.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it seems something we could use. I definitely see that there's a not negligible ramp up time, both in terms of the capabilities and the deployment. That's an observation, not necessarily a complaint, because I don't know, so far it's basically free, and with the good community support and a lot of plugins, and a lot of things are handled behind the scenes for you. It seems like a robust product. So, but it is something to note. That's it for now. I don't know, unless you have questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chris, do you want to talk about the use cases within your company that led you to use Flyte?
Yeah, we're also in the pretty early stages. We have Flyte binary deployed in EKS using AWS resources, S3 and things like that. I work with Terrence, who also added some support for Stow for Azure, for Stow. So we also have it deployed in an AKS cluster using Azure Blob Storage. Beyond that, we're at the pretty early stages of actually using it for full pipelines. Our EKS instance does have a simple workflow that ingests some data from a blob store, does some basic transformations, and then stores it again. But that was basically a POC to prove that we can have it deployed in EKS and actually do something with data. Beyond that, we haven't implemented it as part of any of our production pipelines, but we hope to in the near future.
Mm-hmm. So what type of pipelines are you experimenting with currently?
Right now, they're basic ETL type things. We expect to ingest a large amount of data from disparate sources and want to be able to package that up with just minimal transformations, basically just metadata about the collection of messages, and then store them in long-term storage. And then from there, have a secondary pipeline that does some more interesting stuff with it. So like I said, we're in the really early stages of that process, and we're not entirely sure if this will run in EKS or AKS or both. But at this point, we've proven that we can deploy to both environments, which was our first step.
All right, thank you. And Dennis, do you want to talk about the use cases?
Yeah, I can tell. We still have not been started using Flyte so far, but our use cases is that basically to test a model, we provide a lot of different perturbations, modifier of a model, and different feature extractor, for example, of a model, which can be also quite sophisticated block. And then we have so predefined pipeline where we can plug in these different perturbant and feature extractor to get some value and analyze it to provide some number. And here, basically, we built a pipeline, this direct recycle graph by ourselves. So because we need to put some blocks inside, optimize it, and we want to use Flyte to deploy it, to run it on some clouds and not on a local machine.
So are you currently testing your pipelines on the demo cluster?
No, not now. We not start to integrate Flyte yet, but yeah, it's
all right. Thank you. And Blake, do you want to talk about your, how has the experience been so far? So how are you finding Flyte?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's been pretty nice. We ran into one kind of weird. So I guess there's a couple things I'll mention. So one, doing the we use Helm to deploy, and doing the upgrade from like the 1.9 to 1.10. We were just starting to look into the agent, and then the agent sort of changed how it was deployed, and I guess it needs a new Helm template to deploy, so that kind of threw us off, and it's paused us on looking at the agent stuff, just because we didn't have time to kind of figure out how to get that deployed. Let's see, another thing that's been interesting. So we are working with a contractor, and there's some sensitive data that we have, and there's no ACLs that we can use inside of Flyte. So what we've had to do is stand up a separate Flyte instance that's kind of isolating the data over there. So any pipelines or workflows that are created that have the sensitive data, we are, kind of keeping in its own instance, as opposed to using some type of like ACL model. So that's something that I'm definitely curious to know how others are dealing with that. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's been a nice experience.
All right, thank you. Dan, do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I basically set up this Flyte instance on our on-premises high-performance computing system, and it's definitely been a challenge for me. I would say it was, Flyte is one of several orchestration tools that I was interested in trying, and I was hoping to kind of get something up and running quickly, and then move on to comparing it to other things. But it took quite a while to get it working for our workflows. I think the pain points have been, we didn't have a Kubernetes cluster up and running to start with. So even just getting more familiar with Kubernetes was a bit of a barrier. Another issue is that we because we have very heterogeneous pipelines, having good support for raw container tasks is important, because we have a lot of things that aren't written in Python, or they're, have very like specific system requirements. And so I sort of, I guess, hit some challenges with getting things running smoothly with container tasks. And yeah, also moving raw files between tasks. I think it's sort of, from the sound of it, there's a lot of, Flyte is often used for like ETL tasks where you might just be moving a couple of files between tasks, like CSV files or other tabular data. And I think Flyte has been great for that. When it comes to moving like millions of images between tasks, that's like something that has been a little bit of a challenge, I think. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It would be great to just dig in on that real fast. When you say moving between tasks, are you talking about how you need to basically download the data into a pod before you can start running computation on it, or is it something else?
Yep, that's what I'm talking about. Just like kind of best practices for moving just a ton of individual files, image files in this case, into a pod before executing the primary container.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Jake, so how has the experience been so far for you?
So this is kind of a first experience I've had with deploying anything on Kubernetes. So I've been able to deploy it on GKE following the sort of Terraform scripts that I think David had for Flyte binary. But I kind of stumbled more with like setting up the domain stuff, because that's not an area I had any knowledge with. And then we kind of waited a week whilst we were trying to set up the authorization layer on it, to connect to like our workspace accounts, which I think from the guide online, we kind of struggled to map it up. Fortunately, we have like a support company. We kind of were able to figure out like what was missing. So we've kind of just got to the stage where I think yesterday we finished with, we have it running, there's a domain, but we haven't got to like moving any workflows there yet.
Thank you. And Ethan,
yeah, so I'm basically at the point of just doing installation, POC kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm not running any real pipelines at this point. I'm more interested in kind of what the infrastructure and architecture looks like, how that would kind of fit with our distribution. I do have a lot of Kubernetes experience, so that part isn't too challenging. My commentary on the architecture would be that there's a little bit, in my opinion, there's a little bit too much of the plumbing is kind of exposed in terms of the ways that clusters need to be connected, and the way that AWS kind of resources need to be configured, for instance. I think in an ideal world, those sorts of details wouldn't be exposed in like multi-cluster setup. I should mention I'm talking about multi-cluster in particular here. Multi-cluster setup, I think, would be agnostic to the environments where it's running. So in other words, I would expect that maybe there's an agent that could run inside of Azure, but the main Flyte instance is hosted in AWS, for instance, right? So in my idealized world, those sorts of cloud-specific and Kubernetes-specific details wouldn't leak through the architecture like that. Just to give you a point of contrast, I have been using Prefect also. I've set that up and done POCs with that. The architecture, I think, nails it a little bit better for me. It's set up a little bit more like CI agents would be set up in a platform like Azure DevOps or Travis CI or Circle CI, et cetera, where you install an agent, the agent then communicates back up to the centralized server and picks up the work that it needs, and doesn't necessarily need any specific details about, topology or environment where those things are running. There's just a communication protocol where those two things are trusted by each other. And the reason that's better generally from a security perspective is that then you don't need to reach into client clusters from parent clusters. Like typically you don't want to set up like that. You'd want something where the agent clusters only access the centralized clusters. There's only an ingress point there. So that's one thing that I'm kind of like struggling with a little bit in terms of like that design. I think we can make it work, but it's probably not ideal. That said, a lot of the rest of the feature set of Flyte looks great. I think kind of nails it in a lot of other ways. But that would be my one, just based on kind of the initial work and discovery that I've done so far would be my one comment about things.
Does anyone want to chime in?
Yeah, and maybe I'm totally off base and there's some things that I've missed too, since I'm some net news. So please, feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, my 2 cents. Yeah, I was. It's curious because these days I was thinking on the multiple multi-cluster patterns and probably having some form of operator or agent that will handle, for example, credentials distribution to the different data planes and really centralize everything. Because yeah, as you said, a lot of stuff is exposed in a multi-cluster deployment right now for Flyte. So yeah, definitely makes a ton of sense. Kai.
No, I'm just wondering, Ethan, what if Prefect is working for you? Actually, I didn't try Prefect, but why are you trying Flyte in the sense like?
We're evaluating a number of tools right now. So, Prefect is great at the multi-cluster support, but there's a lot of other things that it doesn't do that Flyte does do. So, like everything in software, it's all about trade-offs and pros and cons and finding the best fit for your particular environment and use case, right? So, there's a lot of things I think that are great about Flyte, and that Flyte I think is ahead of other platforms on. So, I just wanted to make comments about that kind of multi-cluster topology stuff.
Hey, Ethan. Hi, this is Haitham. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay, about your setup. So for your Prefect trial, you are using their managed cloud
No
app, or you're using this just the open source?
Yeah, just the open source version, right? And so we have a multi-cluster setup where I've kind of deployed the agent there and set up worker pools and worker queues.
I see. There's I think a lot of features that are available only in the cloud program. Look at that too. The managed version of Flyte, where we at Union sell, is set up the way you're describing. So you do install. I don't know if you are looked at the docs for that or not, but one of the things we can enforce there is authentication. We can authorize the operators. We know who is talking to the control plane and what workflows they can pull to run and so on, which without enforcing authentication, you can't really guarantee in just the open source Flyte setup. But yeah, I think it is. I agree with you. It is the right setup to pull than to push and expose the cluster endpoints and hard code these credentials and all of this. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I'll be happy to talk more about that. I don't know if you're open to like exploring the managed version. But if it fits the bill and fits your needs or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we're sticking with open source at the moment, but I will
Yeah.
keep that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think if you get past, I guess, that point and you would like, start happily using Flyte and you would like to contribute back that portion, we'll be happy to also work with you on that, re-architecting the communication protocol between the propeller, the worker pool, and the control plane.
Yeah, fair enough. That's probably an area where we could contribute, but I don't commit to it just yet, but
sure,
it's certainly an area where we have some expertise and we'll be able to help with.
Yeah, I think as you're probably just trying to get something working and fits what you are trying to do is definitely the top priority, and all of these details can be worked out later. Cool. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Denis, so how has the experience been so far for you?
Well, it was nice, but as I said, we haven't used it so much. We just tried to with demo cluster. It was good, but I have a bit of doubt that we are going to. So basically, inside our framework, we already have task entity, and with Flyte, we need basically create task, let's say runtime. So we create a graph runtime, and the question is if Flyte supports it or it's not a best practice.
Sorry, would you mind filling it up a bit? Yeah, I appreciate it. With coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Enjoy your coffee.
Oh, dear.
Sorry, Denis. So what was your question?
Basically, we want to create a DAG, so pipeline on runtime. So it's not some pre-built graph when we decorate task function with task decorator, but we already have some graph and want to deploy this graph, which was built in runtime to Flyte. And if it's don't recommend it to do, and Flyte works good only with predefined task, or maybe there's some any advices how to do that.
Sorry, can you elaborate more, Denis? I didn't quite get what the DAG you're trying to build look like.
So basically, we create a test, and test is some pipeline where we can provide as plugin different, let's say, perturber of image, for example.
Okay.
And it can be different, and we, for example, if we have several perturber, we can build several tests with several test results. And it's not something that we know before running our framework. So it's only something that we can get in the middle of work, that we want to build not one graph, but actually 3 graphs. And also execute it with Flyte to execute on different nodes, because it might be all this perturbation might be computational expensive and so on.
Yep. Yeah. Have you looked at dynamic workflows? I think should.
I saw, but I haven't investigated so deep
Yeah.
in dynamic profiles yet.
So it tries to keep the syntax pretty much the same, so you can write an add dynamic on a function, and then inside that function you can use the inputs to build other DAGs, and then return them, and they will like that task will run just to generate the DAGs. And then they will run the same way that sort of statically defined workflow would have run. So get distributed on multiple nodes and everything. I think that sounds like what you're trying to do. There's another piece depending on how, if you know that the DAG beforehand, like if you know what it would look like, you just need the add dynamic. But if you don't, and you're like, depending on conditions, you will like call this task or that task and formulate the DAG imperatively. There's another feature that you can use in conjunction with that. It's called imperative workflow, where you can build nodes and add inputs and so on in code. There are a couple of examples here that might explain. David, thank you. You are already ahead of us. Okay, so David sent a link on the dynamic workflow, and this is another link on the imperative workflow. So take a look at both of these. I think should help you do what you're trying to do.
Will do, thank you.
All right. Chris, so could you talk about your experience?
Yeah, like I said, we're fairly early in the process. We don't have it in a production environment yet, and we don't have it working on any real data yet. Getting it up in EKS, the Flyte binary, was relatively straightforward for Terrence. He has a lot of Kubernetes experience and a lot of orchestration platform experience, so that was pretty easy for him. On the AKS side, obviously not everything was supported initially, so that took a little bit of time. For me personally, I didn't have any Kubernetes experience, so trying to understand the difference between kubectl and flytectl took me, a few days. But overall, it's been a really positive experience. We really appreciate the community support and the quick responses in Slack. That has been excellent. It's the first open source project I've kind of contributed to or been even really read about. So it's been a pleasant experience for me.
All right, thank you. So are there any pain points that the team should be aware of? This is to everyone.
Maybe I didn't get to it in my reading of the documentation. I came from developing in Spark for the past a year or two. It's not entirely clear to me implementation-wise. For example, if I generate a large list and then I pass it to another task or using map, like how is this handled by Flyte? I mean, maybe I want to stream the list. At some point I saw that you can yield from a task, if I'm not mistaken, and then you pass the iterator, but in the next task it shows up as a list. So is this being materialized before the task? Like implementation wise, it's not entirely clear to me, and that becomes important when you have larger objects and like higher scale of things.
So is serialization and deserialization of data not clear to you? Is that concept not clear to you?
No, so that obviously serialization of data is not too complicated. I'm more, I'll try to rephrase. For example, if a task returns an iterator and then I pass that iterator, can the next task start working on the results of the previous task in a streaming kind of way?
We don't support. Yeah, Haytham, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. We do not support streaming literals, is what we have been calling it. I think we have an RFC for this, if I'm not mistaken, but this is not implemented. We were looking for somebody to partner with who has a use case for it. If that is a thing you are interested in, we'll be happy to work with you on that. But that's the concept is exactly what you're describing. You would return something that, we can call it an iterator, I guess. We're calling it streaming literal. And you can immediately start consuming that in a subsequent task, and they would both pretty much start at the same time. And as data is produced, get streamed over to the processing, to the next task to process it. The only there is no streaming today, so the only thing you can do is either return the list, but if it's too large, then you can offload it to a file. So you can return a Flyte file instead. Or if there's a structure to it, you can return a structured data set and then use it in the subsequent task. But yeah, the subsequent task will have to wait for all the data to be generated before it can start running.
Yeah, and let's say I do offload to a file. There's still the issue of if you want to map it later, then you can't. It's a single object.
Correct. Everything I will give you are really hacks for this, but this is not a great way to structure it. You can create. So you can start a map on like indexes, and they pass the same file to all of them, and they can just these workers can read like the file and index into it based on the index input.
So let's say that's maybe too low level, but basically a Flyte file, it won't automatically load the whole file into the pod, like only if I read it.
Correct. And it streams as well, so it doesn't it will start immediately giving you bytes as you read it, even before the whole file is downloaded on the pod. Yeah.
And quick question about the structured data sets. Is it anything like data frames in Spark, in the sense that if I read a specific column, it will only read, let's say I stored it a Parquet file and it can read only that portion of the file?
Correct. Yes, that's exactly.
Okay.
So the back is a Parquet. This is just a syntactic sugar for Flyte to use it so you can express the structure of the data set and so on. But in the back, it's exactly as you said. It is stored as Parquet, and if you only read one column, it will only read that portion and so on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I had a question. This is a little bit related thematically to guys' discussion there. But basically my question is, if I need to pass in sort of just call it like 500,000 images into a task, or run a task on a 500,000 images, is there kind of like a template that you guys have for how to run a task like that? So in this case, it seemed like the Flyte file abstraction is not really designed to be used for such a long list of files. Maybe I got the wrong impression from the docs, but it seemed like that's not really the intention.
So there is also a Flyte directory
Right.
So you can represent, let's say, a prefix in S3 where the 500,000 files are, and you can pass that around, and you can use like OS directory functions. So you can walk that tree, and you can index and find the files you need or the batch of files you want to process per task, and then only read those. So like it will be all metadata otherwise, or just passing names of files around. Is that what you're looking for, or or that one task will need to process all 500,000 images?
I didn't quite understand your response, but yeah, I think we're on the right path. So, for example, let's say we have a machine, we have like a deep learning model that needs to be run on each of these images in batches of like, say, 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Is there like a recommended way of doing something like that?
Yeah, so I would do something similar to what we were just talking about. Like you would send those batch like maybe ranges, construct a list of those ranges, so from 0 to 100 and 100 and so on, into a list, and then run a map task on that, and pass the Flyte directory as a single input to all of them, the same input to all of them. So then each one of them will start up. It will get, let's say, 3 inputs, right? The start, the end, and the Flyte directory as inputs, and then it can read that section of the directory. I don't know, how do you index into, like, is it, are there numbered or are the names of the files? Like whichever way, yeah, I guess you index into, or you structure the file names. It can use these ranges to index into the directory. Did I get that right?
I think I understand. Okay. Although in this case, like Flyte directory, that's primarily used that will automatically download like a remote directory to the pod.
If you just call like download on it, yes, it will download everything from that directory. But you don't have to download everything. You can walk it, and in this case, it will only like transfer metadata. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I have an observation. I wonder if I'm correct. I think it's less of a use case for Flyte to work with such large numbers of elements. I mean, that's already in the borderline big data pipeline in a sense, and I don't think Flyte is meant for it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure how do you draw that distinction, but this is a very common scenario we customers run into, running deep learning models on huge data sets. It's just like running in batch and repeated processes across a large data set. Is that what you mean when you say big data compute?
So maybe it is meant, like maybe it's less common. Like I come from big data. In my previous company, I worked with a lot of data, so we used Spark to process like gigs of data. So like 500,000 of files is something that Spark can process easily.
And so there are
maybe when machine learning is involved is more the advantage of Flyte and all the integration, and then the fact you can actually write regular code. It's less. Spark is more for optimized SQL queries and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I got the distinction. And I assume that you can run Spark also as Spark. Like one of those tasks in Flyte can be a Spark task, and it will automatically spin up a Spark cluster for you. And run data processing on it. But we have seen, but as I think you have correctly pointed out that running machine learning models is slightly different than what you would use Spark for. Like you don't really have a Spark pipeline to optimize and try to efficiently pass data around for compute in those cases, right? They are very distinct data sets in that sense. You want to run the same compute on each batch of data. And what we saw in a lot of cases, people who started with Spark because of familiarity, because of the other problems they had that needed Spark, and started using Spark for this, and then switched over to a much simpler model where it's just a map job on a lot of data. So a lot of improvement in runtime and compute usage for the same reason, right? Because Spark doesn't benefit you, and there's a lot of overhead involved in shuffling data and so on. But yeah, I would say it depends, I guess, on what you're trying to do, what the compute you're trying to do on the big data.
Yeah, got it.
Does anyone have any more topics they'd like to discuss?
This is also relevant to our discussion with Flyte Directory. So I just wrote this in the chat, but in our use case, we were mainly hoping to deal with raw containers. And so it seems like the support for raw containers is just a little bit uneven, and that more of the development has been on the pure Python task. Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely fair to say. I would, if you don't mind filing an issue on that, that is something we would definitely be happy to look into.
Okay.
So are you running raw containers because there's no Python in the container? It's all like some native binaries running?
Well, it's funny. In the fullness of time, there will be other pipelines I'm running that are not pure Python, but this one actually is Python. It's just that it has a very specific set of requirements that I couldn't figure out how to get running in a Flyte Python task, very specific like system requirements. Or system dependencies, I should say. So I was only able to get it running in a container that I built myself. And so I guess another route would be to try to build that container with FlyteKit, but I also wasn't able to get that working. So yeah, I kind of was stuck with basically a raw container that I built, but that didn't know anything about Flyte. And then just getting data into that container was a bit awkward. So
yeah, I think there's a lot more support for like primitive types passing and so on than for fancier types. You can so you can definitely write that code, like you can pass the, let's say, a 3 prefix in as a string into that container and do the walk with fspec yourself, which is essentially what Flyte Directory is doing. But that's not a great answer. We should definitely support Flyte Directory better in raw container tasks. Hopefully, it'll be good news to learn as well that we are also in parallel working on the FlyteKit dependency issue, simplifying that so that you hit less conflicts and it's easier to get it installed in, alongside your other dependencies.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I found that that just the process of building a container with FlyteKit and my own dependencies, for some reason, wasn't straightforward. There aren't a ton of examples. Like there is the like the CLI or something will generate a template for me, but it just didn't even, the generated template didn't that Docker image that was built from it didn't work, and I don't know why, but at any rate, yeah, glad to hear that there's more ongoing work in that direction.
Yeah, we will definitely look into that. The template, the generated template, that should absolutely work out of the box.
Should work, yeah.
So, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look into that. If you can send us maybe on Slack the command you use to generate the from templates. Yeah.
Okay.
We can try
Thank
to.
you. Yeah.
No, thank you.